Granddaddy Brandt. So, how old are you now, Granddaddy?
82.
82. That means you were born in February of 19... January
20th, 1921.
That's right, because it was the day I joined the Army. And then you had... Your dad was... What was your dad's name?
Horace M. Brandt.
And then your grandfather. We saw... It was a great-grandfather that we saw.
In that picture?
Right.
Well, I never knew. Well, the only time I ever remembered him was just a few months, I guess, before he died, and I was only about 2 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember him laying in bed, and he had a long white beard. He come down about here, and it was above the cover. And, my great-grandmother, she died in 1930, I believe it was, 1931.
So you probably got some memory of her.
Oh yeah, she was blind, and but she had good hearing and everything, and she was a pretty rugged woman. She's part Cherokee Indian, I think. Excuse me, either Cherokee or Blackfoot or some of the Indian tribes. And my grandfather was he was French, but I don't know he had whether he was had any other
Mixing in them.
Nationality mixed up in it or not.
On the Brandt side came from Denmark, right?
Huh?
The Brandt side of the
Brandt,
family.
yeah, they come from Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yeah. You happen to know about when you came over this way, or?
Let's see. My dad was born in this country. My grandfather on the Brandt side, he came over from Denmark, and his brother came over from Denmark. I never knew my uncle, but my grandmother, she was a Mills, and she was born and raised in I believe it was in North Carolina. I know when my granddaddy on the Brandt side came to this country, he came in on a sailboat and landed in Boston, and he migrated down south because it was too cold up there for him.
That's hard to believe coming out of Denmark and Boston was too cold. So he came down. He come pretty much straight into Jacksonville, or?
Well, he settled out at Dames Point.
Okay. So.
And that's where all the Danish people settled.
Okay, everybody kind of went over to the Dames Point area.
And my grandfather on my mother's side, I don't know where they migrated from, but I think he was born and raised somewhere around the Mayport area. It might have been St. Augustine, or it might have been Ferndale or somewhere, but I know he came from a fishing village.
Okay, so
that's all I know. And they lived in Mayport, which was a fishing village.
It still is.
Yeah.
And
Mostly.
my grandmother was born in Florida, but I don't know just what city or anything, but it was right around this area somewhere.
So
around the Jacksonville, Duval County area.
Both sides of your grandparents were both river people. Everybody grew up on the water, and
well, that's back in them days. Just like kind of like the Japanese, everybody fished,
Right.
And it wasn't. Well, my great-granddaddy, I have heard, now I don't know for sure, but I've heard that he was a mail carrier between Jacksonville and St. Augustine, and used to have Pony Express route.
Okay.
And
The horse and buggy.
horseback.
Oh, horseback.
But that probably took a lot longer than the 30 minutes it takes now.
Yeah.
They didn't have any paved highways either, did they?
Yeah, they go through the swamps and everything. He was, I heard that he was shot by an Indian who didn't kill him. But whatever it was, I think must have crippled him up pretty bad or something or other, because I never knew what kind of work, except for what I heard, being a Pony Express driver, a rider. Granddaddy and grandmother on my mother's side used to run a kind of crab factory,
Right.
and they got the crabs and picked out the crab meat and stuff like that. And so my grandmother made deviled crabs and sold them to the little old stores and stuff around Mayport. But she sold off the front porch of her house.
It's-
His mother used to make the best devil crab. And his sister, Marguerite, made them, and Helena. But I've never learned the art of making devil crab. I like to eat them.
Learn the art of eating them, but not making them.
Well, the eating part's the best part anyway.
Yes.
It's,
That's the point in making them.
yes. So let's see. We got going back to we're talking about your grandfather and then what'd your dad do? Was he?
Well, he was a fisherman too to start off with. When his daddy died, and my dad was only 7 years old, and he had one brother and one sister. And my grandmother, which was, she was a Mills. And I was just thinking, well, I know she run a little store and a post office in New Berlin, which is Dames Point.
It's New Berlin. That's on the other side of the river from James
Yeah.
Point, right?
No,
Or near Blunt Island, or is it?
it's right at Blunt Island, but it's on the mainland side there.
Okay.
See, Blunt Island itself is just an island out there that used to be called Goat Island. The family of Christophers took a couple of goats over there, and they homesteaded the place for a long time, and they raised goats. And they were fishermen too. And but getting back to the story of the Brandts, my mother was raised in Mayport. My dad was raised in Dames Point, which is about 6 miles by water.
Right.
And he used to catch out and go in tide, go to Mayport, catch the incoming tide coming back. So it wasn't too hard. Huh?
Swimming?
No, in the
In a
rowboat.
Rowboat. Yeah, they didn't have much powered boats back then, did they?
Yeah, they had, there's a few of them, but most of them were sail.
Right.
But they had what they call skipjacks, which was a sail motorboat, and the little motor just enough to, in case there was no wind,
Right.
to take them. They could get back home. It'd take a little longer time to
Right.
get back home.
And so is that how they met? Your dad floating out to Mayport and
Well, he used to run the mail over there,
Okay.
and my mother was she was a maid in the hotel over
Your mother?
there. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Huh?
I didn't know
Hey,
that.
you remember that old big hotel that used to be on the corner
In Mayport,
in Mayport?
I guess.
That's where they met. When they had the post office there too, you know, and when you deliver the mail, that's when
Strike up a conversation and.
yeah.
Well, I've seen pictures and I've seen the painting of a big houseboat that somebody in the family used to live on.
We all did.
Everybody did, huh?
That's what I lived.
He lived on the houseboat when I met him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what's whose boat was that, and how long did that?
Ours.
Oh,
His dad made it.
oh really? That was a big old boat.
Yeah.
Wasn't too damn big. It was back in them days, but I mean, it was built on a. I think it was 30 by 72 foot barge,
Yeah.
and the house itself. When there was. I think it was about 58 foot or something like that, long and 30 foot wide.
How many children were there in your family?
9.
And each
So-
one of them had their own bedroom.
So it was.
Houseboat, so,
So
you
it
know
was
that
pretty
was
big.
pretty big.
Yeah. So there were 9 kids. So there's at least 9 bedrooms.
We had, each one of us had our own bedroom, but there was only 3 baths in the house. And it was 2 upstairs and 1 downstairs.
So how'd the plumbing work on that? Did you just pump river water into it, or?
No, we used city water.
Okay.
Just see, we tied up at a bulkhead and a dock, and just run a hose line over from the bank to the houseboat.
Okay.
All the wastewater and everything went right into the river.
Yeah, they
Didn't
didn't.
have septic tanks or anything on the boat.
Well, back then the city sewers dumped straight into the river too, so
Yeah,
about the
Yeah,
same
they
thing.
fish and eat the fish out of the river.
So,
we used to go out in the morning before school and catch enough fish for supper that night,
and then
and shrimp right off the boat, off the houseboat.
so did the boat always stay in one place, or did you?
Yeah. The only way you could move it would be to take a towboat.
And pull it out, yeah. But,
We lived on that from, well, we built it in 1932 and lived on it till 1940. Just before the war started, wasn't it? Yeah, 1941.
okay, so that was mostly your teenage years on the boat then.
Yeah.
Okay. And well, what's one of your biggest memories when you were a kid? Maybe one of the funnest things or one of the scariest things that happened when you were little. I know about that time there was the Great Depression, so that had to be kind of scary.
It wasn't scary because we didn't realize, that we never had anything, so we didn't worry about it. you
Yeah.
know. As long as we had 3 meals on the table, and sometimes it'd be 3 meals of fish on the table.
Hey,
We'd eat 3 meals a day.
yeah. Well,
And he goes, my dad worked, he was a foreman in the shipyard, and he had a lot of farmers working for him. And we got fresh fresh vegetables every Sunday. We'd go out to somebody's house and all loaded down with fresh vegetables.
and so
So we didn't have to worry about
So-
eating.
so you probably one of the luckier families. You you probably didn't have a whole lot of luxury items, but you at least had food on the table.
Luxury. We had luxury every morning when we got up.
At least they had food.
Yeah.
A lot of times we didn't during the bad depression.
Yeah.
My dad was a carpenter, and nobody was building during the depression. They couldn't afford to.
Right.
So he would go different places. He came to Jacksonville and worked a little while, and he'd send money home. And but then when they got through building whatever it was, that was all he had to do. So he came back home and tried to find work. But it was really rough for us. He had some brothers who farmed, and they would give us some of their vegetables from the farm. And a lot of nights we went to bed hungry.
Yeah. Grandmother, you said that your dad he would send money back home. Where was home? Was in Georgia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
is that,
little town called Brooklet.
Brooklet, and that was
And we later moved to Statesboro, which was about 9 miles from there. And that was kind of a small town too, but bigger than Brooklet. And he figured that he'd find more work to do there. But still, people weren't having anything done. They couldn't afford it.
right.
As a matter of fact, we couldn't afford anything until Roosevelt got in office.
Yeah, I remember.
And he created jobs. He had started the CCC,
NRA and APL.
where young men, and they would go in a group to different parts of the country and work. I think they went over to Hoover Dam and worked.
Yeah, the CCCs was mostly what they call a conservation.
Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yeah.
And
They,
that helped a lot of families. He had the right idea.
Yeah.
It kind of pulled us out.
they built parks and campgrounds and stuff like that. Where they lived at while they were doing the work, So it was pretty nice. They'd make a couple of dollars a week
Something to.
for spending money. The rest of the time they got their food and everything, sleep quarters and all that for free. But they had to build it
Right.
before they got it.
Mm.
And then when the war broke out, of course everybody went to work in shipyards and aircraft factories and clothing factories and stuff like
Right,
that.
machine shops and.
Yeah, right down there where the Assumption Church and School is now, the Bishop Kenny School. That was a shirt factory during the war. When I was born and raised on the south side, and at that time it was South Jacksonville. And when you cross the river, you got into Jacksonville. We had our own mayor and police force and everything on the south side. But when it
Consolidation thing.
consolidated it, yeah, then they made it all one Jacksonville. And now the whole county is Jacksonville, which is one of the biggest cities in the United States, except for Alaska.
Yeah, Juneau, Alaska, I think is. I want to talk a little bit about your family, grandmother. You remember?
I think that my family came mostly from Ireland and France. And
Germany.
They
Your dad had a lot of German in him.
they too migrated down to North Carolina and then on down south.
And your family was your dad's family was the Hendricks family,
Yes,
and then
they were all boys. My grandmother and granddaddy Hendricks had 10 kids, and they were all boys.
Farm hands.
Yeah. And well, that's what they did, farming. So that was good, I guess. And anyway, we
From the
lived.
other side of the family were Deersos, which is French.
Deer so.
Yeah.
Okay.
We lived simply, and there were 5 of us children, and
In your family?
6 really.
There's 7,
Yeah, no 6.
6.
Lewis came along later, but we grew up with mostly 5, and my mother and dad were pretty strict. And there are certain things my mother didn't allow, like fussing or any words that weren't just right.
Right.
No.
And
She didn't allow no rough housing.
no roughhousing.
No.
And
So we were kind of a peaceful family, I guess you'd say.
that was little Granny, right?
Yes.
And she was a music teacher. Was that what she do? Was it? I think.
She did a lot of things. She taught piano.
Okay.
She taught school, and then she sewed a lot,
Worked in-
which was popular back then. And even after we got married, she worked, and she worked at was May Cohen's then,
Okay. Then it became.
and Furchgut's and the higher class stores, and she would redo men's suits, and I mean that was pretty tough sewing.
No, I'll bet.
I mean, yeah, and she worked right on as long as she could. She bought her own little car. It was a little blue English Ford, and she drove it around
She was
Jacksonville.
65 years old.
Which is.
Yeah,
Taught herself how to drive.
scared me to death to drive it. We were going out to see Lewis and his family one time, and we were in the wrong lane, and she said, "Oh, I got to get over that way," and she just took off over that way, going like this. We made it though, and yeah, she was a strong-willed person. My dad was too, really.
Yeah, I vaguely remember little Granny. I remember saying, well, you know, if it's little Granny, then he must be little Granddaddy. But I don't really remember him any at all. But I understand he wasn't all that little. He was a pretty.
No, he was a pretty good hefty sized man.
I remember him mostly as sitting on the front porch of that house on Pearl Home Road, and he'd sit in that rocking chair like this, you know, and he'd twiddle his thumbs. By then he was old and didn't have enough to do that he could do to
Right.
keep him busy. And I think he was bored to death or something. He'd watch the traffic go by and sit there and twiddle his thumbs.
Mhm.
But he did still grow garden,
Okay.
and that helped.
What about your grandparents and your great grandparents?
I don't remember any of them.
You don't remember
I
any of
didn't know any of them. They all died before I was old enough to know them.
Okay.
I barely remember a grandmother, and I think it was my mother's mother. And she was kind of stern. I know we were not allowed to run in the house. And then they built houses with a hallway from the front door to the back porch. And we liked to run, chase each other. And I fell one time and hit the pump. You know, I had a little hand pump on the back porch. And I fell, and she, instead of getting sympathy, she said, "Well, you know, you weren't supposed to run in the house." But that's all I remember about my grandparents.
Yeah. I remember I sat down with you. I don't want to say how long ago it was, but it was at least 15 years ago. I guess I was about 12 years old, and I had a project for school, and you told a story. I guess it was one of your great uncles. Probably a story that you heard maybe from your mom or something, but one of your great uncles that was in Georgia at the time when General Sherman marched to the sea. And
That was my dad's family had a farmhouse, and when they learned that Sherman was coming down and tearing up everything in his path and stealing all the food and everything, and taking the men and I guess some of the women, and my dad and his brothers went down to a creek a couple of miles from the house and just stayed down there while he came through, and he did go through their house. His army went through the house and took some of the things they had, but they didn't tear the house down or burn it down like they did a lot of them.
yes,
And anyway, they survived that. It's a good thing they did, because they probably would have taken the boys and made them do work for them or something like that.
yeah. And that was where were they living at the time? What part of Georgia?
It was near a little town called Portal, Portal, Georgia, not far from Statesboro. And we went up there looking for that old house, but they had torn it down, so we didn't get to visit.
Yeah.
But we left to go spend the day there with my parents, my aunt and uncle. I
No.
love peach cobbler to this day.
One of her aunts, I don't know whether the same one she's talking about now, but used to make pickled peaches.
That was her Aunt Julia, Uncle Melvin's wife.
Was that
Uncle Melvin was the oldest one,
on your dad's side?
yeah,
Okay.
of the 10 boys. And his mother had twins, and they were both boys, but they both died. My dad's mother liked to, well, she knew a lot about medicine and first aid and stuff like that, and people in the neighborhood used to call her whenever they got sick or got hurt, and she would go take care of them.
They didn't call her out for a sew. They'd send one of the kids down there to come up there quick, and somebody hurt.
In those days, that was calling the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep hearing Vidalia, Georgia. I heard that quite a
That was a place in one of the little towns not too far from Statesboro. They had a nursing home there that was run by the church that they went to, called Primitive Baptist, kind of a strict group. Anyway, the nursing home was where my mother's sister, Dolly, stayed when she got old. And I think the nursing home was good. My Aunt Dolly was kind of a loner, like she almost drowned in a ditch when she was just almost a baby. And it left her brain a little damaged. And she never got married. And so she was kind of a loner by the time the rest of the family grew up.
Right.
She stayed with us for a while, and she stayed with some of the other members of the family a little while. But finally she went to this nursing home, and she died while she was there.
You're 83 now. You'll be 84 in March of 2004. So
Gosh, I'm surprised you can keep up with that. Sometimes I have to stop and think.
Well, that's all right. I can't remember my own birthday, so I work on other people's. But so you're almost 84, so you've seen a lot. Is there anything that in 84 years that you really remember the most? Something.
I think the most she probably remembers is when I run them off the ferry boat down there before we knew each other.
You ran them off the ferry boat.
When we were kids, we used to play on a board, a springy board, and we'd put it on something about this high, and somebody would get on either end, and we'd jump to send them way up in the air, and then they'd jump and send us up, stand-up seesaw thing.
Right, kind of like the circus.
And we had one in our backyard, and we had some bread, and I said, why don't we, there were chickens in the yard, I said, why don't we put some bread on the end of the jump board and let the chickens get up there, and we can give them a good ride up in the air. We did that. That chicken came down and the board landed right on his neck.
Oh.
Just right, so he never fluttered. He just was dead time the board hit him.
You had chicken that night, and your mom probably
Yeah, we
wasn't.
did. We had chicken for supper.
I bet your mom wasn't too happy about it either, was she?
I don't remember her reaction too much. I think we were all glad we had something good for supper.
How about the war? I know you and Granddaddy had probably just gotten married when he shipped off to the Navy. How did?
Well, actually, we had 2 children already when the war started, and I was pregnant with David, your dad, and he had to go, and he asked if I was due in about 4 or 5 months, and he asked if he could have a leave to come home when the baby was born. They told him he had to be there to lay the keel, but he didn't have to be there for the launching. So no, he couldn't get off. He was out in the middle of the Pacific when David was born. And it was rough times then.
Yeah.
Really rough, because with me, with 2 little kids, and Buddy was real active. Mickey was quiet. But I was pregnant, and it was a job for me, to handle everything by myself. And I know one time I went to get some milk for David after he was born, for your dad. And you know where Parental Home Road and Beach Boulevard branch off?
Sure do.
There was a little store right there in that branch. Well, I walked and pulled a wagon with 2 kids in it. I got his mother to keep the baby, and I pulled those 2 kids all the way down there to get milk for David, and everything was rationed. You had to have coupons.
Yeah.
And so you could only buy a certain amount of milk, even with a baby that needed it. And you didn't waste it.
Yeah.
You didn't waste anything back then. And if his mother hadn't lived right next door to us, I don't know how I would have made out while he was gone. But he had a bunch of other brothers that were in the service too.
4 of us in service together. Horace is the only one that didn't go to service.
No.
Well, Pete didn't either, did he?
Yeah.
Pete was his younger brother, and he was more like Joe than any of his other brothers were. I liked him. And they were both working in a small boat for somebody, and for some doctor. And he left the boat. They were painting inside the boat. It was covered, so it was kind of close in there. And this paint was highly explosive. And he left the boat and went up on a hill there to get some water. And his brother Pete was down there, and this doctor came down to see how they were doing on his boat, and he was smoking or something. He lit a match.
No,
And
he pulled the light cord,
Oh,
and the light came off the hook that we had it on, and it broke.
uh,
Made a spark and set the. It was undercoating is what we used in the boat. Undercoating
Right.
like you put in the car, and with the ether or whatever it mixed with, I don't know. But then they had blowed up.
That's, I wonder you guys made it out of there then.
Well, he didn't.
Oh, he didn't.
No, and I was down in the shop getting a drink of water. And the old doctor, he reached his hand in there and he got his arm burnt about down to the pan. And the other guy that was in there with my brother, him and my brother were both blowed out of the compartment they were in, and it killed both of them.
So that was after the war.
Yeah, 1948.
So he just made it back, really.
Huh?
So he really had just made it back.
No, he'd been back about a year.
Yeah.
it was just before Bill was born, and our doctor lived with the nurse and her family on the street behind us. And the nurse came over there. She said, I knew I was just going to have to come over there and deliver that baby. She said, because I thought they said on the radio that Brandt was killed. And she said, I just about knew it was Joe. And she said I was coming over there to deliver that baby. But it wasn't him, thank goodness.
Yeah.
It was really an act of God that it wasn't him, that he had left the boat.
Kind of scary.
It was.
But,
It really was.
so we talk about that. So you were in the Navy. Were all your brothers in the Navy also, or did they go to different services?
All of them was in the Navy,
And,
except for Horace, Dickie's daddy. He never did go in service because he had bad eyes or something. I don't know what it was. But anyhow, he was a 4F.
I see. So everybody was over in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Those of you that were in. So,
Yeah, Pete was in Okinawa, and James was in New Hebrides, down south of the equator in the Pacific, and Earl was in Hawaii. He spent his time in Hawaii.
we think about it now. We think, wow, he got lucky. But Hawaii wasn't exactly a great place to be back then, was it?
Well, it wasn't bad then because it done run the Japanese back over in that part of the country.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were. I know you said you were off next to Okinawa for a while.
Yeah, I was on a destroyer.
Destroyer.
And we were in Okinawa about, I guess, about 5 or 6 months.
Was that during the Battle of Okinawa?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
And then we left there and went out on radar picket duty between Okinawa and southern Japan. And then we were in the fleet that went up on the carrier strike on Japan when they dropped the atomic bomb. And then Iwo Jima. And was in a battle in the Philippines. She was in Mindoro. Luzon. And I forget what name that little city there was, where Buckner Bay is. don't know whether it's still Buckner Bay. or-
Buckner Bay. I think that might be. It's still Buckner Bay. I'm trying to remember if it's. Was it an American name that you called it, or
Huh?
did you call it by the Japanese name or the American name?
American name.
Oh, then I don't know what it is because they.
Are you talking about Buckner Bay there in Okinawa?
Yeah. Or are you talking about
Yeah.
the Philippines or Okinawa? We're talking about still, right?
Yeah, Okinawa is where Buckner Bay was.
Yeah.
But this bay there at name was it? Subic.
Okay,
Subic
Subic
Bay.
Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no, the Buckner Bay was named after
General Buckner from.
I don't know what he was reporter. Wartime reporter. There was one of them that was lost over there.
Oh, no. The reporter was. Is it Pyle? Ernie Pyle?
Huh?
The Army reporter, Ernie Pyle.
Yeah, that,
Yeah, he was. In fact, I've seen the monument to him on Iejima, EA Island, right off of the west coast of Okinawa. And we used to do parachute jumps over there. And,
no, in Buckner Bay, there used to be, I don't know if it still is now or not, but there was kind of a reef like out
yeah.
from it. On high tide, you could go across it. On low tide, you had to go around the end of it and come in. And that's where we were during the typhoon that they had in 45, late 45, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we had a bunch of ships in there. We had to tie them together and put the sterns like that, and then the bow. This one would be up here, and the stern of these two, and then the bow of this one. And they took the lifeboats and took the anchors as far out as they could go, and then they tightened them up so that everything was pretty well secured. And 3 or 4 of the Liberty ships went aground on that reef out there. I know the Okinawans went out there and they rambled through the ships after the war was over and got all the goodies out of them.
Yeah. They're still picking stuff up out of ships and stuff they find off. And every once in a while they'll find a new airplane or something that went down over there. That was pretty nasty fighting.
Oh, it was pretty rough.
And,
See, we let's name that bay that's Karamaretta. There's an island over here, and then over here there's a bay, and then there's a point. On low tide there was there's a point that came out there. And there was lots of, I forget the name of the city because we didn't get too much of, what cities, name of the cities or anything.
Yeah.
But all we could see was where they were lobbing shells over there and the planes were dropping bombs and stuff. One morning just about 7, 8 o'clock, and the radio tower field out there, what they call skip bombers, the planes would go down and they'd drop their bombs off the head of them like that, and then go almost straight up and out. Knocked down 4 radio towers there in one morning.
Then
But I guess the Japanese know more about that than what I would.
Yeah. And after the war was over with, before you got to come home, you went up to Yokosuka, right? Up outside of Tokyo area.
Yeah, we went up. We anchored there in Tokyo Bay. We got the LCVP that carried the people ashore, so they could have a little R&R there in Tokyo, and it landed. The little ferry boats we call them, landed there at the the shipyard there in Tokyo. What's the name of that place? Anyhow, that's where we'd land, and we were going up. It's not too far out of the city,
Yeah.
and we'd walk up into the city, and somewhere or another, me and my buddy off the same ship I was on, we got invited to a Japanese home and had dinner with them. And there was, I think there was 2 girls and a boy, and a mom and a dad. We had a real good dinner. And the only thing I didn't like about the city itself was the sewer run right down the drains on the street, you know. It'd run down the side of the street there and go down into the drain. And men and women both would urinate right down the street, you know. Just
Phew.
stand up and let it go.
Yeah. That's it.
But after, I think we was over there about 33 or 35 days. And the war was over, and we had to stay for a while, you know, and do what they call picket duty. And finally, we went back to Okinawa and laid at anchor there for about 9 days, and left and came back to the States. But we took the northern route up by Luzon, by Aleutian Island.
Okay.
Then we came into Bremerton, Washington. We stayed there for about, it seemed like a darn year and a half, but it was only about 9-10 days. we got our orders to come back home. They just posted them on board there. And you go out there every morning, look, see if your name was on the board.
Yeah.
And if it was, well then you'd get your orders from the sergeant or master at arms or whatever the case may be.
Get your chance to go home.
And you get your papers and catch the train. We had to catch the train about 6:30 in the evening. It was about 1:30 in the morning when the train left and come home.
Man.
And coming through Kansas, I believe it was, somewhere where it was mountainous, it all get out. And we had 3 trains, 3 engines pulling and 2 pushing to get up over some of the mountains. And one of the engines sort of, what the heck they call it? Connecting rod, you know, between the wheel, the engine and the wheel. And we had to wait there about a day and a half, I think it was, for a repair crew to come put the bar back in there. It took 13 days, I think.
And I was complaining about taking 20 hours to get home.
Huh?
I said, and I was complaining about 20 hours to get home.
Well, you ain't riding a train.
To this day, he doesn't like trains.
I
I guess I wouldn't either.
Yeah, probably not. But,
Yeah, when I got home, take her and the kids to go down to Miami. We didn't have a car, so I had to catch a train, you know. And of course, it took a day and a half, 2 days to get down there on a cattle car.
no.
Ah,
Well, how'd you guys meet? Was that the ferry boat that you ran?
No, I won in a poker game.
You won her in a poker game?
Yeah.
Pretty good deal.
Huh.
yeah, best deal you ever had.
I won that pot, I'll tell you. The guy that she was going with, see, my brother Horace and his wife lived up above where they lived. And this guy, IRA, that she was going with, he'd rather play poker than to go out. So he gave me $5, told me to take her to a picture show, and he asked me if I wanted a date. I said, yeah, why not? So he took me down and introduced me to her.